In this video, I will help you decide if you should use Zapier or n8n for business backend automations. By the way, I'm Charles. I'm a Go High Level and Automation Specialist, and I've built automation systems for six-figure businesses that saves me hours of work per week. Also, I recently contributed to $400,000 in current revenue for Scaled LLC. Diving right into the video, there are several automation softwares out there that are great at what they do. However, each of these tools have their own unique features or characteristics that makes them great to use for certain unique cases. For example, just to name a few, we have Zapier and n8n for automation. Each of these two is pretty much the same at its core. They are both automation softwares, but they both each have unique features and characteristics that make them a bit different than the other, which makes them great to use for certain use cases, depending on what you need for a business. For Zapier, for example, they tend to do well if your automation needs to be tied to a specific lead, because Zapier has this feature where you can just look up the person's email, phone, or name, and it's going to show you every single Zap run that happened for that person. And for this reason, it's great to use Zapier. Also, the data flow within Zapier is pretty much linear. Once they go down one of those paths, they can't go back and choose another path. Whereas for n8n, it's a bit different. It doesn't just allow you to manipulate the data flow however you want it to be, but also it can host multi items in one execution. And what I mean by that is, for example, if you try to look up 5 rows in Google Sheet, it can work with those 5 rows or 5 items in that one single execution. So in that one single execution, it can go to this branch, to this branch, to the middle branch, to the bottom branch, and then kind of like converge at the end or however you want it to be. So that's the difference between Zapier and n8n. Really, the biggest difference is for Zapier, it's pretty much the data flow is linear, whereas for n8n, you can kind of like work with multiple items in one single execution. So yeah, here are 10 scenarios, and we will go through each of them one by one and then decide if Zapier or n8n would make more sense to use for each of these cases. So yeah, number one, that is a very great example, is when someone signs up through, let's say, iClose, Calendly, or Typeform, as you can see here. You would want to use Zapier for it because when someone signs up, it's tied to that person. That entry is tied to that person, and therefore it's just much better to use Zapier, because then in the future you can look up the run for that person. Then you can kind of like troubleshoot or just like check what happened to that Zap run for that specific person. Number two, that is also a great example, is payment triggers from payment platforms such as Stripe, WAP, Fanbases, and other platforms, because it's tied to one specific lead, to one specific person. It's also great to use Zapier for that, because in this scenario, for example, whenever a payment fails, this Zap workflow gets triggered. And in this scenario, it's just much easier to set up because WAP, Fanbases, and Stripe is already connected to it. But also, every single payment that happens or every single payment that fails is tied to one person. So therefore, it's going to be much easier for you because you have a record of the Zap run for that person. And then in the future, you can just like look up, kind of like troubleshoot if something wrong happens. Number three, and yet another great example, is, for example, if you have a setter in your team and they book a call through, let's say, Typeform or Tally or Calendly or something like that, then it's also great to use Zapier for that, because again, it's tied to a specific record, to a specific lead. And yeah, you can just like, for example, here in this workflow, when they book a call, new submission through Tally, it just kind of like find the records to the Zapier tables and then creates the record in CRM. And therefore, it's straightforward. It's very easy to set up, and at the same time, it's very easy to troubleshoot, because in the future, when something happens, something wrong happens, or something happens with that lead or record, for example, you can just like look up into the system and search their email or phone number, for example, and it's going to show you everything that happened for that person within your Zapier automations. Number four, and another example, is, let's say, a nightly job of pulling all of the no-show leads from yesterday and then kind of like scoring them, rerouting them. In that scenario, it would be much better to use n8n rather than Zapier, because you're now working with not just one lead, you're working with multiple records of many people. And so yeah, it's just much better to use n8n for that, because for example, in Zapier, you're getting charged per task. And therefore, if you were to do like a bulk testing for many people, of like, let's say 100, you're going to get charged for like 100 tasks. But for example, if it's within n8n, you're just going to get charged for one execution, and in many cases, it's going to be much cheaper for you. Number five example is scraping leads. If you were to set up an automation system for scraping leads for a business, it's just much better to set it up with an n8n, because you're now working with hundreds, if not thousands, of records of people. and it's going to overwhelm if you it's going to be overwhelming if you set it up within Zapier, and it's going to cost you a lot as well. Whereas with n8n, it's going to be much easier to set up and maintain because again, n8n can handle multiple items within one workflow, whereas with Zapier, you can just like work with one lead at a time. Number six example is enrichment in bulk. So let's say you have 200 leads and you want to look up their company data, you want to verify the emails, score them and write results back. It's just much better to set it up within n8n because in n8n you can loop over many items and then send the items in just like one execution. So yeah, it's much better to set it up within n8n, whereas with Zapier it's going to become overwhelming. Number seven example is cleanup jobs. So for example, if you want to find stale opportunities, old tags, contacts with no activity for the past 30 days, and you want to kind of like archive them and stuff like that, you would be much better off setting them up within n8n because you're again working with many records, working with many leads at once. And so yeah, it's just much better to set it up within n8n because within Zapier you can't quite do that. Number eight example is form submissions or survey submissions through let's say Typeform or Go High Level Forms. And then let's say you want to ping your internal team through Slack, add them as a record in your CRM, and all the good stuff. It's going to be much better to set it up within Zapier because now it's just tied to one specific lead, one specific person, and yeah, it's much easier to set it up within Zapier. It's going to be much easier to maintain as well. For example, here we have a Zap workflow for qualifying the entries. As you can see, Typeform new entry and then split into paths if they're from US or if they're not. Number nine example is call cancellations or call reschedules for a specific contact through Calendly, let's say. It's great to set them up within Zapier because it's tied to one specific contact. And yeah, you could just like look up the Zap run for that person by searching their email in the future. And kind of like it's going to be much easier for you to troubleshoot in the future and maintain the workflow as well. So yeah, for example, here we have a workflow for call cancellations. As you can see, invited canceled. We update the lead in our CRM, and we update our Google Sheets, sends the Discord, and all the good stuff. So yeah, last example is one workflow for many clients. So let's say you have the same exact workflow for 8 to 12 clients, but they have different Slack channels. Yeah, they have different CRMs. They have different routing rules. That's going to be better to set it up with an n8n because n8n allows for like advanced routing configurations, but whereas you can't quite do that within Zapier. And also you could set it up within a software called Pipedream. It's pretty much the same software as Zapier or n8n. It's also for automation. But here, as you can see, we have, but the difference within Pipedream is that you can host multiple people in like one single workflow. So even if they have different Slack channel IDs, Slack or close or CRM accounts, you can still host it within just like one single workflow, but that's a bit advanced for this video. So yeah, if you notice, there's a pattern with these examples, and that is if your automations needs to be tied to be one specific person, one specific lead, it's going to be much better to set up within Zapier than n8n because Zapier has a feature where you can just like look up a person's name, email, phone, and it's going to show you every single Zap run that happened for that person. Whereas if you're working with multiple leads, multiple records, multiple people, it's going to be much easier for you to set it up within n8n. It's going to be much easier to maintain as well. But also the workflows that you're setting up within Zapier can also be built within n8n. It's just that n8n is a bit more advanced. It's going to be a bit trickier to troubleshoot as well because n8n doesn't have the feature where you could just like look up a person's details and it's going to show you every single Zap run or workflow runs that happened for that person. So yeah, for those reasons, Zapier and n8n is different than each other. They're unique in their own ways, and because of those, they are great for certain use cases that the other tool may not be great at. But yeah, I think I'm going to end the video here. It's been great to just talk about like Zapier and n8n. And yeah, I hope I was able to help you in some way. And if you like this video, please subscribe. And I'm going to create much more videos in the future. And I'll be seeing you soon. Peace.